Court is in recess as former President Trump's one-time fixer Michael Cohen testifies for a second day in Trump's criminal hush money case. Cohen recounted a meeting with Trump in 2017 at the White House. He has gone through the discussion of the repayment arrangement for the hush money compensation for Stormy Daniels. And he will soon be facing questions from the defense, and we could see the tone shift when that happens. ABC News executive editorial producer John Santucci and ABC News contributor Brian Buckmeyer join me now for more. Brian, this whole dynamic of the part that they are getting to now. Now we are post-payment, we are post-reimbursement, and now it's a question of, is Michael Cohen going to cooperate or not? How much do those conversations matter to this case?
I don't think it matters much to the case in terms of the question of, did Donald Trump falsify business records, the elements of the crime. But I think what we're doing now, in a sense, is almost damage control or preempting any kind of attacks that the defense is going to kind of levy against Michael Cohen. Understanding why Michael Cohen went from the quote-unquote pit bull, the Michael Trump, all the positive things that started off, and how that relationship just began to kind of you say the cracks in the relationship started to form, and why we have the Michael Cohen and Donald Trump of now, which I think is what the defense is going to focus on as to why Michael Cohen is at it with Donald Trump and why these posts and why the TikToks. I think getting context of that helps in terms of trying to strengthen Michael Cohen's credibility, which is going to be, I think, damaged at a minimum when the prosecution ends, the defense goes up and cross-examines him.
And John, what do you make of these words of reassurance that Cohen is saying he got from Trump, that former President Trump, then in the White House, called him and said, you know, you're going to be okay. I'm the president of the United States. I'll take care of you. Stay strong, et cetera. And now Cohen is saying that's the last time we ever spoke.
Yeah, I think it's all believable because, again, you have to remember, Donald Trump was so concerned about Michael Cohen spilling it all, right, because of the fact that he knew all. So I think Donald Trump making those overtures, other people making the overtures on Donald Trump's behalf, none of that is surprising at all. I mean, not legal, not a good move, to be clear, because I'm looking at the lawyer. But the reality of it is that that was Donald Trump's playbook, right? That he wanted to keep people in the fold at the end of the day. It does in part relate to the fact that why he was paid such a significant amount of money. I mean, you could argue, I would argue, the money is clearly a payoff. Now that we've learned it's only 10 hours of legal work that were done, and somehow it's over $400,000 minus $130,000 payment, as we both noted earlier, that's a heck of an hourly rate, a really good one. Wish you and I could get that. Maybe we got to talk to somebody. But I do think, though, what's remarkable about all of this, again, you know, some of this we've heard before, some of this we're hearing more of in real time as Cohen is really giving us that fly-on-the-wall feel here, Diane, is that how much Donald Trump really feared about all of this coming out, right? Because, again, I think there were so many, you know, ripple effects of it all. And we have to remember, too, right? It's not like it was this one payment that Michael Cohen could cause problems for Donald Trump, right? It's not like it was just Karen McDougal. There were other things. I mean, Michael Cohen has testified already that he lied for Donald Trump repeatedly. We saw a lot of that come out during his congressional testimony when he, you know, basically told all about Trump's businesses and finance. I believe the line was, called him a liar, a cheat, you know, a con artist, et cetera. I mean, there's a lot of things that Michael Cohen knew because he was involved in, but a lot of things he also knew just from being around Donald Trump and that proximity to the former president when he was just businessman Trump.
And John, Brian, while Cohen was on the stand, we also learned that the appellate court ruled on the gag order, essentially upholding the gag order and denying Trump's appeal. What do you make of that finding?
I think it makes sense. And I understand the former president and every one of his supporters saying that this is a limitation of his First Amendment right. And they're absolutely right. This is a limitation on Donald Trump's First Amendment right. But the First Amendment right is not absolute. The law school example you often get is an individual can't just run into a movie theater and scream fire. And so it becomes a balancing act. And the Court of Appeals seems to suggest that that balancing act done by Judge Merchan was correct in looking at the potential for intimidation, harassment, and anything that could derail the the proceedings, they limited what Donald Trump could say in the sense of you can't attack these, I think it's like 4 different categories of individuals: jurors, witnesses, the judge's daughter or family members of the people in the proceedings, or the actual DAs themselves, the assistant DAs, not the head DA, Alvin Bragg. And the judge said, that's enough. That's okay. There's plenty he can talk about, plenty that others can talk about on his behalf. And this gag order, at least at this stage, is constitutional and valid.
And in terms of the lying aspect, one of the big hurdles for the prosecution here is Michael Cohen's credibility. We have heard him testify today and yesterday about how he lied, he says, for former President Trump. So what does each side do with this? Because on the one hand, you have a guy who keeps talking about how he's a liar, so can you trust him now? But on the other hand, he's painting himself as a liar who did this for a man who he loved, who he served, who he would do anything for. If the defense tries to go too hard on that, could they end up with a jury who feels bad for Michael Cohen, this guy who did Donald Trump's dirty work under assurances that Donald Trump would protect him and then was left out to dry? That's his version of the story.
They could. And I think as we're kind of anticipating that the level of how this cross-examination is going to happen is much different than the direct examination. You talked about going in yesterday, and I think the words you're using is very calm and relaxing the way that Michael Cohen was on the stand. Not the hothead as he's been described. But for Todd Blanche, I think what he's going to attempt to do is trying to bring out that personality of Michael Cohen to, one, substantiate the fact that he said that he is that, and also paint him as that individual. However, if Todd Blanche goes in there yelling and screaming and Michael Cohen responds in a calm and quiet kind of tone, you don't want to make the witness on the stand who has already admitted to being a liar a martyr as well. Because if you do that, then to your point, yes, the defense can go too far and make Michael Cohen look like the victim in this case, rather than someone who helped perpetuate an alleged crime.
And direct examination has resumed again, so Cohen is again back on the stand, back testifying, and talking about this attempt to open up a back channel of communication between him and Donald Trump. John, what do you make of that, and where, based on what you know of the story, which is a lot, where do you think they have to go before they hand this over to the defense?
They're pretty much getting to the end here. So this is a conversation and dialogue he had with a guy named Robert Costello. Robert Costello, for a very long period of time in this saga, if you will, represented Rudy Giuliani. Costello was one of Giuliani's deputies when Giuliani was the U.S. Attorney for Southern District, New York, before he became the mayor of New York City. And what happened at one point in 2018, Costello offers, let's be clear, offers to represent Michael Cohen. They really don't move forward with full legal representation. But one of the things that Cohen has testified before the grand jury when Donald Trump was indicted in this matter is that Costello offered to create this back channel, a way to communicate with Trump orbit. Now, we should note as well, Bob Costello also went into the grand jury and refuted everything Michael Cohen said, also under oath before that grand jury. So, not that we're going to see Bob Costello suddenly take the stand in any of this. I don't think he'll get called by the defense. But I do think it just gets into what was going on in Donald Trump's orbit to try to keep Michael Cohen a part of the fold. So I really feel like, quite honestly, we're getting to a moment now that we've got a little bit more to go. Because remember, Michael Cohen eventually does testify publicly before Congress, and then the story basically ends. So, between that and a little bit of, damage control they need to do with things that Michael Cohen ultimately got hit for officially as a liar, which would have been that congressional testimony, which would have been that conviction in the Southern District, New York, then it seems like that part of the movie's over.
All right. John Santucci, Brian Buckmeyer, thank you both.